Welcome to Hitting Home with Mike and Arif. And this week, Mike, let's have a look at some numbers. There are some interesting things going on in the market. There are some signs. There are some indicators. And let's break down what they actually mean, because they may not mean what you think they do. Mike, what are your thoughts on the numbers this month?
My thoughts are the big question mark is that shift here? Are we changing from the crazy market we've had into the calmer market that we predicted we knew we were going to see at some point this year? I'm still not 100% certain, but I'll leave it to everybody to decide based on what's come in that we've seen here. The sales numbers are down from March to April, just over 11% in the Simcoe County region. Now, that could be an indicator that the pool of active buyers is drying up. We don't know. But one other possibility is, given that we typically see a spring market that's busy and then there's a bit of a lull as we go into summer, whereas this year, that spring market activity seemed to begin right in January. So maybe we're getting the early lull coming in now. I'm just not 100% sure, but time is going to tell.
Yeah, I'm gonna throw some things in there to this mix, Mike, and I think the first thing I'll clarify with you and just look for your nod of approval is that a lull or down 11% isn't a price indicator being down 11%,
no.
But it's just buying and selling activity.
Yeah, prices are still up. 1 or 2% month over month prices have continued up. Now, that's a lower percentage month over month increase than we've seen in some of the previous months. But
and that's the interesting thing, right? We often see people who want to get first to market and they want to take advantage of something. They start a trend or they have a feeling that, you know what, I can go in and I can, because the demand is there and I've positioned myself well during the off period, or I was planning on selling. I got my house ready. I redid some painting. I staged my house. I decluttered it, and I'm ready to go right when the market is hot. And there are other people who have watched and said, "Hey, you know what? Maybe this is a good idea." And they might take an extra month or two to get themselves ready to list. And by that time that they do list, there's more people in the market. So we may just see people who have jumped in, not late per se, but they just weren't the first ones jumping into the marketplace.
Yeah. And as I've always said, whether, timing and positioning, if you're buying and selling at the same time in the same market, whatever advantage or disadvantage you have on one end of that, you're going to gain back or lose on the other. So it always evens out. Yeah. If you're selling for a high price, you're paying more. So
yeah, absolutely. Mike, I will want to restate something that I've stated in the past, certainly the last several months, if not a year. First and foremost, I want to keep our ground on this, and that is that I don't believe that there is a Canadian housing market. So you got to watch the newspaper, you got to watch the headlines, you got to watch the economists who like to make these sort of bold blanket statements that are really unfounded. There is no Canadian housing market. There's no Ontario housing market. There are localized markets all across all different countries. And so Simcoe County, Barrie in particular, from our standpoint, it's in a market of its own, and we have proximity to the GTA. We've been talking about it for several months, that obviously there is the influence with people not having to work down in the city and they're able to telecommute or work from home. Yeah. Obviously, that's given an opportunity for people to leave slightly tighter quarters and find larger quarters for a similar price, if not a considerable discount. And so they're moving outside the GTA.
Yeah. That is I just want to say, we are all individual markets, but we don't operate in a silo. I'm just emphasizing what you're saying. And our biggest outside influence is the GTA market.
Certainly.
Yeah. And we're seeing a quieting happening there now. So typically when it happens there, we're, we echo what happens there to a degree within a month or two. So.
Yeah, absolutely. But we do definitely see these trends. While we may see a slight slowing of transactions, what does that actually mean? And how should somebody take that? I want to make sure that we don't set a tone of either fear or of false hope, because I personally don't believe that we are going to see the housing prices retract. And again, you got to be careful what you see a list price for versus those signs that go on top that say sold for over asking. Well, that in itself is part of the strategy a lot of the time in a market like this, where if I go in just a little bit low, I'll spur a bidding war and I'll get more than I thought I was going to get if I listed for what I really wanted.
True.
So you got to watch what the actual interpretation of those numbers.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And if I can just further clarify or maybe further confuse, at this time last year, we saw sales volume drop by half from 1 month to the next. I believe it was February to March. We literally dropped 50% or 51% in the volume of sales, which at that time I thought, oh, the market's crashing. We're just coming into COVID. But oddly enough, then from that point on, we saw month over month increases in volumes of sales, which continued on right into this year. So what we're seeing now might be just a little bit of a dip that's going to correct itself next month. And again, the bottom line is projections are just that. It might keep raining, it might not. My trick knee tells me that by some point this summer, we're going to see a quieting and a leveling out of the market. And I'd like to talk about why that's a good thing for everybody if we can, that leveling
Absolutely,
out.
Mike. And I think that that's an actual statement. Here, we look at a couple years ago, and we might have to pick this up on the other side of the break, but we look back in 2017, what happened? The sky was falling. People lost their minds. They went hysterical, thinking that there would never be another opportunity to get in the marketplace. And then what happened a few months later? That was a massive correction. That wasn't a crash. That was an absolute correction that advised people, hey, you know what? You kind of got carried away with this. So what are we seeing right now when we do see a quietening of the market? There is a good thing, and I'd like you to touch on that for sure. The good thing is that hopefully we'll see a pause, or at least maybe even a reprieve, an end to buying homes without conditions, buying homes sight unseen, buying homes feeling like if I don't buy it, I'm going to miss out on this opportunity, and so I'm going to have to pay 100 or 200,000 over asking, and then figure out the financing later on. Mike, we are going to have to go to a break, so I really want to pick that topic up on the other side of the break, and maybe you can sort of give us some insight into what you think, how that will affect both the buyer and the seller when things are calmer, when we've got time to be more reasonable and more thoughtful in the approach that we're going to take. So I'm going to give you a few seconds to think about that while we go to break. Stay with us. We'll be right back with more of Hitting Home with Mike and Arif on Rogers TV Barrie. Welcome back to Hitting Home with Mike and Arif on Rogers TV Barrie. And this week we are talking about potential. What are the indicators of a slightly slowing market? And Mike, you were about to use a big word, and I wanted to go to break so that you could figure out what the word meant. Tell us what it means.
Which word is ramifications? And I think the ramifications in this case, as they apply, are that a more balanced market is going to see an end to some things that have really made me and hopefully most other realtors uncomfortable, and certainly a lot of their clients. And that is this overbid situation that we constantly see now. You're going to put a bid in on a house. If it's a $700,000 house, and as you indicated before the break, a lot of times sellers and their agents are positioning the price on that home to try and spur a bidding war, and they'll price it a little bit low, get people on. By the time that $700,000 house has received an offer that's accepted, we're up to $800,000 or $850,000. So you don't even know what price range you should be shopping in this market. The other things are you're going to have to go in, sadly to say, and I'm not saying you should do this, but the offer that often wins out in those bidding situations are the ones with the higher price, but also the one with the fewest or no conditions. And going in without a financing condition is never a good idea, and no agent should be recommending that to their client. And going in without a condition of inspection is bad news too, because you don't know what you're going to get. When you're buying an older home, without having an inspection done, there's going to be a lot of things you could possibly learn that could impact on the value of the home. So, no
Mike, I'm glad you're bringing all that.
Crazy.
I'm glad you're bringing all those things up, and I think it is really critical. This will not be the first time, and I strongly encourage people to do their homework. If you're thinking of buying or selling, listing, whatever it may be, don't wake up one morning and go do it and pull the trigger. That's never in your favor. But we do know history can repeat itself. Lenders are not dumb.
No.
Sometimes you may wonder what they're thinking. Sometimes I wonder what they're thinking, but they will do their homework. They will protect their position. And when you get into a scenario, or when a buyer gets into a scenario where they went in with no conditions, remember this: the lender will always see a copy of the purchase agreement. They will see that no conditions were placed there. Therefore, they instantly will interpret that as no home inspection was done. They will interpret
it's a red
that.
flag for sure.
It is a red flag, and they will therefore do their own market valuation. And so, as I said, and as you repeated, I think I'm glad you did, sometimes it's a strategy to go in and list the home slightly under what you expect to get, hoping that you're going to get more than you were hoping to get. So the determination of fair market value is open to interpretation at that point. Yep. But when a lender sees a purchase agreement that doesn't have any conditions in there, they're going to do their own homework, and they're going to determine whether or not, in a normal market, not an inflated market, not a hysterical market, not a tight market, whatever it may be, when in a normal market, a balanced market, would that home sell for that price?
Yeah.
And they may not decline to lend the money, but they may decline to lend all the money you think you need.
And often, if during that 5 days, 7 days, 10 days, whatever you've put in for your condition of financing, if during that time period where everyone's doing their homework and the buyer is being qualified, more often than not, if it's going to fail, it fails because that buyer, for one reason or another, or a number of reasons, does not qualify for the amount of money they're borrowing. But what we're seeing a great increase in this year is the financing condition failing because the house itself doesn't qualify, just as you said.
That's right.
It's been overbid by 150,000. The lender gets their appraisers in and they go, that house is not worth this. We're not going to finance.
So they'll give you the same percentage of what they believe that home would have been valued at, and you have to come up with the difference. And you have
on top of your down payment. Yeah. So if you had already factored in, well, I've got a $50,000 to put down on a home, but now there's $100,000 discrepancy between what they've evaluated it at and what you're paying for it. You got to come up with that $100,000 now too. So that's the scary thing.
Yeah. So we've been talking about, though, so far on the show, why is the market seem to be cooling? And cooling doesn't mean the prices are going down. Cooling means that the sort of anxiety, hysteria, and the rate at which trades are being made is slowing or lengthening, if you will. And I think that that's a good thing, Mike. We talked about that, and you mentioned it. Cooler heads will prevail. It'll give people an opportunity to do their homework, to do their due diligence, et cetera. And that's probably a good thing. What else, though, could be going on in the market right now? Obviously, more people are in. Yes, we're coming towards summer. Maybe people want to enjoy their summer to the degree that they can. What else is going on in the marketplace right now that could be cause for this slight pause, or what else are people focusing on?
Yeah. Well, I'm seeing the volume of new listings is increasing. So once those new listings start taking offers, then those people are rebuying in all likelihood, and there's a good chance they're buying in the same market. So the market's not going to suddenly, become tumbleweeds here. It's just going to quiet down to what I say a healthier market. I'd like to talk just with regards to numbers again. Does this give any indication that prices are suddenly going to drop? Like the house that's $800,000 today or $700,000 is going to be worth $100,000 less 6 months or a year from now. I highly doubt that. I can't know for absolute certainty. But so long as interest rates remain relatively low as they have been, and there's no indication why they won't, they may go up a point or so in the next while, but they won't go up dramatically. I think the stability will be there. And what we're seeing now, I just want to throw some other numbers in while I can that I had jotted down before we started. And that is this last month, when the statistics were done by the Canadian Real Estate Association, the average price of a home sold in Barrie last month was $776,000. In Simcoe County last month, the average sale price was $799,000. And in Innisfil, the average price of detached homes sold was $824,000. What's interesting about that is if you go back 10 years or more, the positioning of those numbers was reversed, whereas the lowest number there is Barrie. followed by Simcoe County, and then the highest price average is Innisfil. Was the complete opposite 10 years ago, where Innisfil was always less. I used to see buyers come into my office and go, well, you can't really afford that kind of house here in Barrie, but we can take you into Innisfil. We could probably find you that amount of house for that money. Now, Innisfil is the prime place price-wise to buy a home. So the demands for Innisfil are higher. And again, I think it's because of all of those Toronto buyers coming up here. They want to be in the southern part of Barrie as opposed to anywhere north. So.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there are some other things, factors to take into consideration as well, Mike. And I think one of the things that we're going to see is, well, how long does it take to get a new inventory on the market in terms of people prepping their home for sale, doing any renovations, thinking that they're going to sell, or buying and doing renovations? People are having to take into consideration that right now there are some external pressures on the marketplace. Building materials are selling at an 800% premium. That's 8 times premium. Yeah. That's crazy. To a year ago at this time. And what does that mean? That means to put up the new deck, to put up the new fence, to do the renovation, to buy a piece of a single 2x4 is up 8 times over what it was this time a year ago. So when we come back from the break, Mike, let's pick up on that and let's talk about the impact that building materials and other factors has had both on the single residential transaction as well as the building community, the development community in general. Stay with us. You don't want to miss this last episode. We're going to get into it a little bit, or this last section. Stay with us for more of Hitting Home with Mike and Arif on Rogers TV Barrie. I'll get it right one day.
Welcome back to Hitting Home with Mike and Arif. And Arif, you touched just before we went to break on another dynamic that's coming into play with the real estate market that I think is going to impact on things. We can talk about how that may come to be. And that is the rising price, the ridiculously rising price of building materials, particularly wood products. You go into Home Depot. I don't know whether to buy Bitcoin or plywood these days, because plywood is, well, you might know, I'm not 100% sure. You've been buying more building materials
or more.
$100 a sheet. And whereas it was what, 13, 14 or 20 bucks a year and a half ago. So that, what I see with that is, I thought given COVID and that, more people may decide to stay in place longer, renovate their homes and do things on their homes. I'm thinking if it's me, and I'm facing what would have been a $30,000 renovation, which is now going to be a $70,000 renovation, I may just decide to put up the sign and sell and buy that house that has those things that I was going to build into my existing home. So I have a feeling that may play into the market. It may drive prices up a little bit more for those homes that are buy, fix, and flips. But I think it's just going to put some hesitancy on the whole renovation trend that we've been seeing over the last year and a half. So
yeah, Mike, well, I'm going to tell you that I'm smiling for a reason. And I do this with a bit of a chuckle, but we are trendsetters here on this show at Hitting Home with Mike and Arif. And
we set the trends.
I have a funny feeling that the entire world was listening to us about a year ago when we said, now's the time to build your oasis, to stay home. You're not spending money down south in Orlando, or you're not going away on vacations. You're not doing the family trip to Europe or whatever it is that you might otherwise have been doing. You're not even getting Wonderland seasons passes this year or the last year, right? So all that money that you were going to spend elsewhere, go ahead and invest in your own home and create your
hopefully some listed
oasis, your staycation. And well, I think that that's exactly what happened. And I do think that people took that, not necessarily our guidance, but that train of thought and did exactly that. And they invested. But what ended up happening, Mike, is that everybody went and did that. A lot of people went and did that. And that put pressure on the commodities. That actually is what we talk about always. It's let the economy, let the market dictate the price. Yeah. What actually happened though, Mike, and what we're seeing is, some people might say that it's egregious increases in price, kind of like the toilet paper rush. And that it's out of control and that people are being greedy and it's profit taking. But the other side of the equation is, think about this. COVID has had an effect. COVID's had an effect on workplace. It's had an effect on essential workplace.
Production.
And it's had production. It's had an effect on the assembly line and on the manufacturing process. Everything from flowers at Mother's Day were hard to come by in short supply, not because there aren't flowers growing in the fields, but there's nobody there to pick them and process them because of COVID restrictions. So that's actually put a tightening on the supply in the marketplace, and therefore had an increase on the actual price of the unit. So
that's one contributor to the inflation we're likely to see in the months and maybe years ahead here. The other contributor
so Mike, you
to
said
that,
something. You said something though. You said basically I'd be quite likely to just not do that renovation, see what I can get for my home in an as-is condition, and see what I can buy for a home in an as-is condition. And I want to actually compliment you for saying that slightly for a different reason, though. My concern is always obviously the health and well-being of people from a financial perspective, that they don't do anything rash. I absolutely cringe when people go in. I've had clients, actually really just one in the recent history, where they did not follow guidance and they went and put in an over asking bid sight unseen without any conditions, and it backfired on that person. And it was costly. My concern for people is their financial well-being. And I truly believe that if you took advantage early and you got your materials early, good for you. You did your thing. You made your improvements. That's great. I'm concerned that when these restrictions lift and things get so-called back to normal and people are able to travel, I'm concerned for the people who have a lot of pent-up frustration and anger. They just want to do whatever it takes to get out of here. And they're going to use their credit cards. They're going to dip into their savings. They're going to blow the bank. And it's going to cost them, because we will see people who end up in financial straits.
Exactly.
Later on. So I strongly caution against that. Do the best you can to live within your means.
And history speaks of that. You probably heard of in your studies of history, the Roaring 20s. Roaring 20s was a period of time that came right after the 2018-19 Spanish flu pandemic. And once that was over, people literally went crazy. Party, 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 spend, spend, spend. And we saw a similar response to a pandemic that came in the mid-1800s. So will history repeat a third time? I don't know. We're for any wiser or different now than we are historically. History does tend to repeat.
Yeah, Mike, I'm going to say I hope it doesn't. But I think human nature is what it is. And I think people
There'll
are
be some element of
frustrated. And I think there are going to be some people who've put themselves in a position where they're going to wish they hadn't. And then there will be those others who didn't, who sat and waited, and they will seize the opportunity to not take advantage, but to enter the market at that time. There is one topic, though, that we want to talk about. And we say, you know what? As quickly as they come on the market, they're selling. As quickly as they're built, they're selling. They're being pre-sold. Why did the 5-point sell? We've got literally 2 minutes to get in and out of this one. But there are about 8 or 10 projects in downtown Barrie that are multi-unit projects, condos, other developments going on. And after years and years and years of sitting empty and blank, this one suddenly failed in the hottest market ever. I'm not buying what was being sold as the justification why. No,
that place could have sold out many times over. And one of the reasons given was that they peaked at 85% sales, so they didn't have the funding to go forward.
I read something different as they couldn't obtain 85% sales, but 6 or 1 happened to the other at that point. I don't buy it.
No, not in a market where there's 15, 20, 25 people bidding on, not just on detached homes, but on resale condominiums too. So you're going to have to have a
Mike,
better
the numbers don't add up. So, and I just want to say why. I'm not going to speculate. I don't want to put myself in a weird position where I have to justify this. We got to go in a minute, but I'm going to tell you this. When a lender is looking to give money, they have certain criteria. One of them is pre-sales. One of them is absorption, obviously. The other is, though, you have to have secured your materials. So is it possible that the material contracts weren't secured and now they're faced with that rising price, that same 800% that we just talked about?
They were adjusting their numbers day by day as building materials have gone up in price over the past few months. And so that bar that they were probably just shy of was just getting further and further out of reach.
And the other thing that gets looked at is the management experience. And if there was no previous experience, then, a lender's probably not going to give money to someone who doesn't have that partnership with someone who does have the experience.
Yeah. And sadly, people who had planned, who had put their deposits in, have to redo their changes. They will get their deposits back without interest. But one good thing is at least there's not a lot of contractors who had done work and were owed money that are now going to be in court for months and years.
And
like
on
we
that
saw in
note,
another
we got to
big
wrap it
downtown
up, Mike.
project.
We'll pick it up next week, perhaps. Thanks for joining us on Hitting Home with Mike and Arif. We'll see you again soon.